Welcome to Inspire Saratoga, a show that highlights the people and stories that make our home a place of strength, inspiration, and success. I'm Michael Kurkowski, physical and mental performance coach and resident of Saratoga Springs. And in this show, my mission is to connect with the great people who also call this place home, hear about their work and what they do for this town, and share their insights and experiences in health, wealth, and happiness for you, my neighbors. Thank you for joining me wherever you are in town. Let's dive in. Jeff Grogan, welcome to Inspire Saratoga.
Thank you, Mike Kurkowski. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know it's interesting. I've done a million podcasts, but to be able to do it with a friend and a brother, we've known each other for a while.
Long time.
Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
I appreciate the invite. I'm very excited to be here. Just been watching your stuff for years now, and this to me is like, I feel like I've reached the top, the pinnacle.
It's all downhill from here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
No, again, we got a chance to meet about 5 years ago this month when we're doing this recording. It's been a hell of a journey. So we'll get into all that as we roll along. But to start with, I always like to ask about the area. Mm-hmm. So you grew up in this area.
Technically no, but yes, I've been in Saratoga Springs since 1992. Mm-hmm. I grew up in North Jersey. I was born in New York State, actually in Troy.
Mm-hmm. What brought you up here?
Well, in 1992, I had just lost my job down in New Jersey. My mother had moved up to Saratoga Springs the year before. I've been coming up to this area since I've been a child. And to be honest, what brought me up to the Saratoga Springs area was the racetrack.
Okay.
So picture a 22-year-old guy in 1992. I'm coming up here. I'm hitting downtown. I'm going to the races, and I just love the area. I love the history. I love the woods. I love horses. To me, Saratoga just means home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you know much about the area aside from the racetrack when you came?
Not really. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I moved up here. I had no job.
Okay.
I had no prospects. I had an apartment that I rented for $300 a month, if you can believe that.
Okay.
Right on Union.
Shout out to 1992.
That's 1992. That same apartment, I think, goes for $2,500 a month.
Okay.
Just to put it in perspective.
Things have changed a little bit.
Things have changed.
Yeah. Okay. So this is home now.
This is home. Yeah, this is home.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So what's something you think about this area that, I mean, a lot of people know maybe about the racetrack, kind of the community feel. Is there something about this area that you think is really awesome or like really powerful that maybe a lot of people who aren't from this area know about as much?
Yeah. I mean, first thing that comes to mind is that robust downtown area that we have in Saratoga Springs. You'd have lots of restaurants, you have lots of shops, lots of activity going on. But the one big draw for me is that you can go a mile or 2 miles outside of the city and you'll be in some wooded areas for trails, for hiking. You can drive an hour and be up in the Adirondacks for hiking, which is one of my true loves and true passions. You have a lot of historic features. You have the Saratoga Battlefield, which you can go walking on. And you also just have a great community of people. Everybody that I've come across here in Saratoga has just been very kind and very helpful and very welcoming. I think Saratoga really is truly like a brotherhood city almost.
Yeah, there is. It's got a little bit of, it's got that little bit of that city vibe that you can get to. Not big at all, but it's still got that quaintness, and there is some community feel to it. That's why I love doing this show, is because, I think there's so many cool stories around here, and it's just such a strong community connection.
It's a central point. I mean, just to touch on it, you can go 3 hours north and be in Montreal. You can go 3 hours east and be in Boston, and 3 hours south and be in New York City, right? So you're not separated from big areas. But like you said, that small town quaintness is really what I enjoy about Saratoga.
No doubt, yeah. So
100%.
All right. So getting into you, I've got to see a lot of your journey over the last few years, specifically in the work that you've done with healthcare, and now the work that you're doing with the youth, Saratoga Youth Mentor. You were in healthcare for a long time in nursing. What got you into the field of healthcare to begin with?
Good question. So this is my third decade we're entering working in healthcare. So one of my first jobs I got when I was up here in 1992, was working at an insurance company that did mental health and substance abuse benefits. I worked in their member services department, and I got the opportunity to work with a lot of case managers there, nurses, therapists, social workers, et cetera. And and my mother was a nurse. My mother's mother was a nurse. So I kind of got that healthcare blood flowing through me, so to speak. My mother had always said to me, you should go to nursing school because the world will be your oyster, so to speak, because things kind of open up for you. Mm. So after I worked at that company, I said, I kind of like this healthcare gig. So I did. I went to nursing school. Believe it or not, my first degree was not in nursing, not even any kind of health science. It was more of a art history, philosophy degree.
Okay.
So big shift for me.
Tough to do things with philosophy degrees.
It pretty much member services at a insurance company is really what you can do.
Right.
If you aspire to that, that's perfectly fine. I'm not,
right.
No judgments there. But healthcare was a big draw because I've always been kind of in that kind of like service mindset. I've always wanted to help people. I've kind of think back through my childhood and adolescence and how that kind of like that was my draw, was draw to service. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got into healthcare. Yeah. And I got into nursing.
Yeah. Did you know right when you got into it, did you know that, all right, this is my path? Was it a true love right off the bat?
Right off the bat. I mean, first day of nursing school, we sat in an auditorium. There were, I think, 120 of us. And they said, 30% of you will not make it to graduation. That was the first thing they said. And in my mind, I said, I'm going to be one of those 70% that do make it to graduation. And
did they give you more context on that of why they dropped?
Well, the drop rates are so high because it's a hard course.
Yeah.
The training for it is very difficult, and it requires a lot of time, study time rather, a lot of sacrifice. And that at the time, that was something I was willing to do. So lots of people don't kind of partake in that sacrifice. They kind of come into it with like, oh, I'm just going to breeze through this,
sure,
and it's not really that breezy, so to speak.
Yeah.
But yeah, I fell in love the first day. I fell in love with it.
Okay.
I fell in love with it. Yeah.
It's an interesting field of nursing because you're really seeing some of the most challenging people going through the most difficult times. So I can sense on like an empathic way, it takes a toll on you. I was wondering if that is part of the process of why some people probably bail from it.
It's draining. If I think back on my first patient I ever took care of in nursing school, he was a gentleman that was HIV positive. He was end-stage AIDS. And kind of going through a rough time. He had a lot of GI distress, so he required constant care, cleaning, sitting up, etc. And by the end of my shift, my 8-hour shift working with him, and I didn't take a break that day, he turned and said to me, because I just want to thank you because I know how hard it is to be my nurse, essentially, and it's draining. And I walked out of there and I sat in my car and I cried that day because it was the first time I'd taken care of somebody or I'd met somebody who had a chronic illness that was going to lead to an ultimate demise.
Right.
And just that whole concept of like the illness, his path, his life, and it all just kind of rushed in on me and it just kind of broke down. But it hardened my resolve. Meaning like it just kind of made me feel like I'm on the right path. This is where I was meant to be. I was meant to be with that gentleman that day.
Sure.
And I just I hang on to that story a lot.
Yeah.
Because I think back of everybody who's having a difficult time, no matter what stage they are in their health or their wellness.
Yeah.
We're all going through something.
Yeah.
And that kind of like be kind and be considerate and empathetic to their needs.
Yeah. It's challenging too, because some people, you either lean into that punch or you realize I can't fight this fight.
And that's okay, and that's okay because I think you need to ask that hard question of yourself. Can I do this? And if the answer is no, that's fine.
Yeah.
There's lots of other things out there for you. And if you can, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Because we need you. We need you in the field.
Yeah. So 3 decades in nursing,
3 decades.
and now the work that you're doing with specifically with the youth of working with. Tell me a little bit more about Saratoga Youth Mentorship and the work that you're doing right now that you built up.
Yeah. To answer that question, I have to kind of talk about my 24 or 5 year career in mental health care with adolescents and young adults. Worked at a local psychiatric system with adolescents specifically, also with children, and to some extent young adults on the service. And this was a psychiatric service that does both inpatient level of care and what they call partial hospitalization and outpatient level of care. What I noticed in my career there is there was this large revolving door of patients coming back in to the hospital seeking treatment. And I thought to myself, especially with the adolescents, I was like, well, this got to be awful for them to keep coming back in. It's like this recidivism, so to speak. They keep coming back in. And I know that when they get discharged out to services, they're discharged back out to outpatient therapists. If they're on medication, they're discharged back out to psychiatric services for med management, et cetera. But I always felt like there should be something more for them. And I had this thought in my head for 20 years, last 15 years more so. There's got to be something more. So around 2018, 2019, I decided I wanted to do something more. So I became a health and wellness coach, but my area of interest was working with adolescents and these kind of what I call emerging adults. So that's that subset of 17 to 25.
I was going to ask that age group. Mm-hmm.
It's like that rough subset, 16 to 27, right around there.
Yeah.
Okay. And these are students and some non-students as well. But when you're kind of leaving that adolescent frame, right? You're heading out to this world. Think about graduation day from high school and you're 18, and if you're off to college, great. But if you're not, like, you're just out into this world. So
just a big open. There's no trajectory.
Big open, no trajectory. Interesting statistic is that in that age group, about 37 to 42% of that population reports being hopeless, reports periods of depression, overwhelm, anxiety, etc. And a lot of these people who report that aren't really at a level where they need to be like in kind of intensive therapy or even on medication. They need guidance and mentorship. Right.
Sure.
Right. So my thought was, well, what if there was someone that they could go see that they could kind of work their way through? Is more so like this kind of executive management kind of thing. Like, how do I set myself up for success? Yeah. Right. Like, what am I supposed to do with all this? Case in point, you look at a college student going in for the first time and they're coming in and they don't have time management skills, right? Maybe they don't have good study habits. They're sleep deprived, right? They don't have good nutrition. You're grabbing meals on the go and just grabbing what's coming out of the box, right? So how can I take this person who really doesn't need to be like in intensive therapy or on medication? How can I take this person and kind of help them like shape their day? Yeah. And work with them to kind of help build their confidence, help them build their kind of risk-taking management approach, right? And then use that so they can build themselves up, right? So that's my premise, and that's where I've been coming in from. So I started this about, like I said, about 5-6 years ago, and worked with a fair number of folks with good success. Yeah. And I just want to bring it into Saratoga at a bigger level for these folks. Yeah.
That is such an interesting stat. Up to 42% feels hopeless
and anxious on any given day.
Yeah.
On any given day. And it just blows my mind. And, I'll get on a soapbox rather, just briefly about medication. 13% of those kids are put on medication. With the developing brain, some of these meds are pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Your brain is still developing up until age 25, 26. Now, there's going to be a few doctors and nurse practitioners that will challenge me on that, and that's fine. I'm not trying to make this into a debate, but really what I'm trying to take this into is that not everybody needs to be on a stimulant like an ADHD medication. Not everybody needs to be on an antidepressant. Some of these kids fall into this niche where they really just need some guidance and mentorship.
Right.
Yeah. Now I've worked in conjunction with psychiatrists. I've worked in conjunction with therapists who are seeing their client on a one-to-one basis for therapy, but then I kind of help them with the accountability piece, right?
Right.
And that's the key is accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting just time frame. I mean, not being in that age group anymore, but going back to that, it's like you kind of released, everything's been so structured for you from, kindergarten through 12th grade. At least you had some sort of, I know in September we're going back to school and you're just following orders in a way.
Yeah.
But now we're kind of bringing you out into the world and saying, okay, now you're supposed to be autonomous. You're supposed to have these things figured out. And if you don't go to college and follow that, which I'm not a proponent, I don't think every kid needs to go to college at that time. Right. Some are going into different ventures. There's not really a curriculum of what to do. So when you say that of like feeling hopeless or anxious, it's like almost like, yeah, duh, probably. And it would seem like, do you see that these kids think at this time, like something's really wrong with this, like something very abnormal in this situation?
100%. So what I was going to say is, first off, you're not broken. Okay. There's nothing to fix. Okay. Having those feelings of anxiety and overwhelm, those are just natural reactions, right? That's your brain's way of telling you, you got to get up and start doing something. Yeah. But what holds us back from doing it is that fear, right? However that manifests for you. So, that anxiety, that overwhelm that you're feeling is kind of holding you back. So having the ability to have someone to kind of help lift you up will do wonders. Absolutely. What's the other statistic I just saw is that especially with the advent of cell phones and social media, students and kids are spending up to 8 hours a day on the phone. Yeah. And that kind of that rewiring for that instant gratification, those big dopamine hits. I got to go on my social media app. I got to do this. I got to do that. And that's all they're tied to is that. So when they walk out of that, like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah. Have you seen, I mean, there's pretty good linear track with data of like from the invention of the smartphone and social media and the changes on that. In your work in this time, did you like even see this change like happening from like, from the 90s to the 2000s, then all of a sudden things really boomed in the last 10, 15 years?
So the author's name is escaping me, but he wrote the book, The Anxious Generation. And what he points out... Jonathan Haidt, yes. What he points out is in 2010 is where we start to see that kind of like that split. So if you look back, I'm going back to like, let's just say like from 1996 to, I'm taking 96 because that's the year I started in the health system. Take 1996 and you go up to like maybe like Y2K, 2001. No cell phones. Flip phones existed, yes. Very few people had them. There wasn't the satellite radio. You had cable TV, but there was really no streaming, right? So back then, when we were working with kids, they had anxiety. They certainly had overwhelm, but a lot of that was delayed gratification. Right. But when we hit 2010 with the advent of the first, I'm going to use this first iPhone. I think BlackBerry was around back then. So BlackBerry had a version of
Palm Pilot.
The Palm Pilot. And pagers. Pagers have been around since the 50s, but more so with the advent of the iPhone, where you actually had instant access to Google or some kind of search engine, where you can just look up stuff, and then Facebook comes out, right? And then MySpace was one of those things that came out, right? There's Instagram. There's like TikTok, and it's funny. I gave a a keynote a couple of weeks ago, and one of the first questions I asked, I was to a group of educators, was, what's your favorite social media app? And I heard 13 different apps named out, right? Right. And most of those educators used those apps, but what they were saying is a lot of their students are using these apps on a daily basis. So they just got this influx of like information.
Yeah.
And adolescents are, they're social by nature. Right. That's just that life development stage.
Right. You're trying to figure the time out. And I'm kind of curious because like this time of, age, just in human nature, it's like, it's that rite of passage time, and there's ancient cultures that they had specific rituals for this time. It's like the Spartans had the adobe, like where you go off and that's when you learn how to be a man.
Right.
And we really don't have that much in our culture. But I remember, before the age where you did have so much in your hand, so much information, you did have some anxiety, but you kind of worked through it. You kind of had moments where you just sat back and thought through it. Yeah. And I'm just curious now as a kid of you can immediately just outsource that anxiety into something else, how challenging it would be to even figure out where to start in this moment, which has to be some of this heightenedness of feeling hopeless or anxious or, depressed. And I think that word gets thrown around a lot.
It gets thrown around a lot. It does. And if you, the other thing too is if you swim back upstream, and again, this is not a judgment call by any stretch, but if you swim back upstream, you see on top of that are the parents, right? And the educators. And they're more than likely having their own specific struggles around this too. I know phones are a big hot button issue right now in this area, especially in Saratoga Springs High School, Walton Spa, Shen, all the local area schools have this. Some have a no cell phone use rule. You put your phone in what they call a yonder bag at the start of the day, and then you don't get it back, right? And others have a hybrid model.
Is that effective?
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know how effective it is. I know that, because I don't have access to data, so I don't want to say it is or isn't effective. But to me, and again, I'm on the fence about the cell phone use in school, but I think it's inherently a good idea. But by taking the cell phone, I think all you're really doing is just treating the symptom. Right. So again, that mentality to swim back upstream, like what's the bigger, larger issue? Yeah, take the cell phone, but what are we giving in return back for that? How are we engaging that student? And you're going to hear this in the education field a lot. My last couple of years working in education has shown me that you can take something, but you need to give something back in return for that. So what does that look like? Maybe it looks like more free time at school. Maybe it looks like open campuses at school. Maybe it looks like more responsibility, meaning you can leave campus for lunch or whatever. So increasing those engagements with the students is key. Taking the phone is just kind of like throwing an aspirin tablet at a headache.
Well, I see. I mean, it's a challenging problem, and I just know, being a rebellious kid myself, if I was giving gates, I just figured out a more clever way to get around it, And
absolutely.
I mean, kids are smart; they're going to figure that out, and I understand they're trying to grasp at solutions to a very complex problem in there. But when you speak with educators and with parents, the adults that are trying to figure this out, what are some of the common questions or struggles that they're seeing with their kids at this time? Because I'm sure it's they're trying to figure it out, they're trying to do good, but not having the skills or really the expertise of what to do. What are some common things that you're seeing amongst them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, the first question I hear is, I don't know what to do. And they're just at a complete loss. Or they've said, we've tried therapy, we've tried medication, this didn't work. And again, that's not a judgment call on therapy and medication. It's just saying they've tried these certain things and those haven't worked. There's not enough to do after school. Two-parent houses, two-parent houses do exist. One-parent houses exist as well. But both parents are working. They're working till 5, 6 o'clock at night. So the students are coming home, and so there's lack of transportation. So even if a school system does have something available, there's really no way for that student to get there.
Mm.
Again, there are transportation immediately after school and up to an hour after school. But if you're looking at like hosting an event, it's hard to get the student there.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the things I hear. Yeah, all they eat is potato chips all day. So there's poor nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
God, there's a great study that came out that talked about the adolescent brain and sleep. And in my opinion, we're getting these students, high school students, up way too early in the morning. There needs to be some kind of a time adjustment to allow for that brain to rest. That adolescent brain needs a lot more rest. So the parent will say to me, their sleep is off. But of course, the caveat being is some of them are up, till 2:00 in the morning playing, Call of Duty or whatever.
Well, there is the circadian rhythm switch that happens, right? In adolescence, right?
Yes.
As we start and it switches as you get to that later time where a lot naturally will be up later, be more night owls.
Yeah.
And then, getting them up at 6:00 in the morning in there. We're fighting nature.
We're fighting nature a little bit, right? Yeah. The parents they'll complain about sleep. They'll complain to that complaint, but their frustrations rest around sleep, nutrition, poor study habits. And then what happens then is that lack of engagement comes in. So they're not going to school, so their attendance is dropping. So I hear that those are the common themes I hear from parents and educators as well. So when they're getting into the school, they're in the classroom, their hoodies up and their heads down, because they've been up since, they went to bed at 2:00 in the morning and get up at 6 or more so roused out of bed at 6.
It's interesting. I just read about this study about how your posture has more to do with your thought process than we thought of. And like, if you think about it, like if you think of a depressed person and just the visual of it, what do they look like, right? Probably shoulders hunched down, right? Probably like looking down. Well, we're doing that.
Yeah.
How many hours throughout the day, like putting yourselves in that postural position versus, shoulders back, open up, deep breath, like how much of that has to do with even just some of the environmental aspects of this.
Have you seen some of those statistics on phone use?
I've seen some of the data behind it, but I'm blanking on like the specific numbers on statistics.
We spend adults, so we're talking about over 30 adults, 4 hours a day on your phone, 4 hours and 20 something minutes on the phone. But out of those 427, 3.5 hours are on social media apps, right? So if you look at that group, that 17 to 25 range, 8 hours and 26 minutes, and 90% of that is social media apps. So
it's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job.
God, that's so crazy.
Yeah, it really
when
is.
you actually see those numbers, like that's freaking staggering, right?
It's staggering.
Yeah, staggering.
There was a teacher, I'm not sure where, so I can't give this person credit, but what she did was she put an Excel spreadsheet, and she had all of her students in the classroom put their phones on, turn on the all the alarms and whatever else. And every time the phone dinged or made whatever chirping noise it made, that student would take their phone, walk up, and fill in the blank on the Excel spreadsheet. What they had was all the social media apps, phone calls, text messages. And then she said, so in a 47-minute class, right, on average, your phone would ding at you 110 times.
Wow.
for that age group.
That's
so can you imagine that? So this is what we're tied to. That's what that emerging adult and that adolescent is tied to. They're tied to that phone.
Yeah.
And they're not tied into their life, right? We talked about, I'm not sure if we talked about it, but at that age is when you're starting to take more risks. Right. But if you're naturally supposed to take more risks at that age, because that's where you're learning how to your place in the world, how do I fit in? And if you're not taking those risks and you're just sitting down looking at your phone and tied to those things, then we got this generation of kids. And
right. There's no need. Why do I need to take risks? I have everything that I need right here.
Right. Yeah. And you talk about, that ritual into adulthood.
Yeah.
we don't have any of those rituals. You're right. You're 100% right on that. We don't have those rituals.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to see, personally, what I'd like to see is to develop some kind of ritual. This have to be like this cultural ritual. It could be your own personal ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's your challenge?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to do? Like, what's something hard?
Yeah. So getting into that a bit, kind of looking at, we've talked a lot about the struggles and the problems, kind of getting into the solutions now of this. Parents come to you kind of that open arms of, I don't know what to do. Like, what's the process that you've come up with, or like the longest levers to start gaining so bring it down from the ether and bring it down onto the ground and figure these out? What are the longest levers of starting to put a plan together that you've seen make the most benefit for somebody who's trying to get on this journey?
So, I mean, I think the first and foremost is you have to have some kind of vision, a goal, and it could be just something very simple, like I'm going to graduate high school, or I'm going to get through freshman year, or whatever it is. So you need something to kind of look forward to, and set your rudder to. What's your North Star? Well, my North Star is going to be to get through 11th grade this year, because maybe 9th and 10th grade were pretty shitty, right? Maybe my freshman year of college was just a disaster. So we start by setting that goal. And then we kind of figure out the best question. My most favorite question is, who am I? So where am I? Who am I right now today? Right.
It's the big $1 million one.
It's a big $1 million question, and you could bullet point that out. I'm a husband. For me, I'm a husband. I'm a father, a nurse, coach. All those are just little segments of just who I am. There's tiny little stories that I'm not bound to anyone in particular, but those are just parts of me.
I keep thinking of anger management with Adam Sandler and Jack Nicholson. And keep going, what do you want from me?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, so we asked that question. Who are you right now? And then who do you want to be? Who do you want to become? What do you want? Where's this taking you? Right. And then we kind of look at those core values, right? So I haven't defined core values. What's a core value? What is that? Right. And then we find out what you're kind of bound to, what's holding you back? What are those kinds of emotions, those things that you do that are holding you back? And then what do you aspire to? Right. So, you can call that the free nature side. What do I want to aspire to? And then we just start working on a plan. Everybody's an individual. There's no cut and paste. I don't come in and say, you got to do these 6 things and you'll feel this way in 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. It's more so it's bespoke to that person. It's bespoke to that individual. Right. I heard all the things that mom and dad are saying. I'm hearing all the things that you're saying too, because we're doing an assessment. One of my favorite assessments, by the way, and you get this free online, is the Teen Compass. It's through, Samaritan Wellness, I think it is. You can just look it up, this Teen Compass, and it's a free PDF. You can download it. I love using this because it's perfect. Why reinvent the wheel? And you have them assess themselves, the teen, and you have the parent assess their teen, and you can also have the parent assess themselves as well. Because again, remember, we're swimming back upstream to find an answer. And now and it's a wheel, right? So it hits 4 areas. I think it's strength, mind, heart, and spiritual. I think those are 4 areas. And inside each 4 areas, there's 2 or 3 little subsections there. And then you get the opportunity to fill this in like a wheel, and then you can see, after answering the assessment questions, where are particular areas you might need work, and then also where you're doing well. Right. So then we can have, the client, the student, the mom, dad, whomever, kind of look at that and say, well, what on this wheel would you like to work on first? And then we pick something. Yeah. And then we have some challenges regarding to that. Right.
I love that. So just the word that keeps popping up with this is just gaining clarity.
That's really all it is.
It is. I mean, I've seen this from being in the fitness world for so long and working. I did thousands of assessments with people over the years. And the most challenging thing for people walking in is I have this goal. I don't know. I don't know. And it's just that I don't know. And when you're in that state, your mind's trying to find a solution for it because it doesn't like those open loops. It doesn't like to not know. So it's just grasping at straws. but you have nothing like on the ground. So it
Yeah.
feels more overwhelming at
Yeah.
that time. By just taking a few moments and just mapping it out and seeing, oh yeah, I need to improve on this. Oh, I can work on this. And just seeing it,
Mm.
it's like the shark in Jaws, right? As
Yeah.
soon as you see it, it's not scary
It's
anymore.
not scary anymore.
The scariest part is the dun like the music behind it. That's the freaky part because you have no idea what the heck this thing looks like.
Right.
Once you actually see it, there is this like this deep breath. Okay, now at least I know where I am.
Yeah.
And I think that's, such a challenge I see with, because I work with adults
Mm.
who are going through a lot of the same stuff. They're just big kids. But now seeing it as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old who doesn't have a lot of life experience, it's got to be so challenging where it's just, but yeah, the answer, it doesn't mean you need to jump on a medication right away or like go into these, deep things. We're finding out what's wrong with you. Odds are there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. Everybody's going through the same shit.
Yeah.
You just need to have a little bit more clarity.
Yeah. I like what you said about the brain and how it needs closure because, because your brain is one of my favorite parts of the body, my favorite organ, because it wants an answer, right? It's always looking for a problem to solve. And someone better than I has said, in lack of a problem, your brain will create a problem, right? Right. So if I'm sitting here, I'm 20 years old. I'm in my sophomore year of college, and I'm just overwhelmed, and I'm just can't get myself. My time management is off. I just can't get myself together, and then I start looking at all these things I have to do, which become bigger things, and I just don't know where to start. And then I create this scenario in my head, and it's always the worst case scenario, right? It's never like it's never a scenario where you can solve it pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Why would it be? It's got to be this big complicated thing,
right? Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't have to be.
I created this idea recently on the Strength Connection podcast to talk with Mark England from Lifted Coaching, and I called it the healing spiral, where I think you get in this process of you have a problem and then you aim to solve it, but you get so used to thinking something's wrong with you. So even if something's not wrong with you, you're trying to find another thing because you can almost get addicted to always working on a problem, not realizing that, no, you've surpassed it. You've actually gone through that. Now go to the next step and actually live the great life. You get in the healing spiral of always thinking you need to work on something else. And this is where, my challenges I've had with mainstream therapy and stuff has always been trying to find that problem, and then you just rummage on that for so long. And I think as a child, as an adolescent, you can always be in this process of thinking, well, something's got to be wrong with me because I still feel bad, or I still have days where it's off. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of part of it. You're going to have some bad days. Doesn't mean anything's wrong. Just have the vision and just stay the course on it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's interesting. I hear that a lot, especially from high school students. They tell me, "Oh, I'm having such a bad day," or or more so, it's like I can't do today because, and they fill in the blank. I got this test, and it's so hard because everything is so hard, and I hear that a lot, and I just don't think they have the tools and the skills available to them to kind of lean into that hard and how to figure their way out of that hard. And hard is okay. Hard's actually where you grow, right? And you can say that to your blue in the face. I used to say that all the time.
Sure.
I got to do hard, but then when it came down to actually doing it, I'm not doing that today.
Yeah, hard doesn't feel great. Yeah,
it sucks. It stinks. I mean, talk about. I'm talking about that kettlebell training, and some days I'm really into it, but I get those days where it's one of those like big days, and I got to do a couple extra more than I did maybe the last time I did this routine, and I'm like, I'm gonna do this today. But hard is, like I said, hard is where that growth happens. So trying to help them understand that the more hard things you do, the easier it becomes to do more hard things.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like a step system.
Yeah.
Right.
To build resilience.
Build resilience so that in a year from now, you're not as overwhelmed and anxious as you were feeling, like say today. Like you look at January 3rd in 2026. Well, look what I did. And that's the key too. We didn't even talk about that. Is like looking at all the things I did well, like what were the wins, right?
Yeah.
Like the things I accomplished, right? And then like celebrating those things, right?
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. I mean, especially counting your wins, such a big thing. I mean, we've gone through that.
You and I
personally, personally in our programs and stuff.
Yeah.
But for kids, I think that's huge.
Yeah.
How much do you think of like physical activity and the lack of that has to do with some of these issues that are going on with mental health and wellness for adolescents?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think let's take a trip back to, if you don't mind, to 1980s when I was in high school. And again, I'm not this like back in my day kind of thing, but it's a realistic look at where we were. Back in high school in the 1980s, we were still doing the U.S. president physical fitness tests. So what's that? The push-ups, sit-ups,
like ran a mile
or something. We were still doing that, right? We had uniforms, like we had clothes you changed into, right? Gym was, if I am not mistaken, I think it was, I want to say it was 3 days a week. My memory's foggy on that, but then if you look at my high school in particular, I'm just picking my high school at random. This is like it's subjective, I guess. 900 students in the school, 90%, and it's still true to this day. I was just down there back in October, but 90% of the student body engaged in some sort of after-school sport or kind of or club. Okay. But the sports were high. Everybody did a sport. Everybody moved. Everybody ran. Everybody did something. Okay. You practiced. You did your 2 sports or whatever it was, and then you moved. And as the years went by, and we bring up into, I want to say right around the pandemic, so 2020. Okay. And I don't have a good gauge on what sports was like in this area from the 2000s to the pandemic. But when the pandemic hit, kids were out of school, but when they went back to school, the requirement was they no longer needed to change into gym clothes. So you could go in your street clothes, right? You could wear your boots in the gym, right? Now, I'm not saying some students don't change. Some do,
right?
But the vast majority don't. And then what you saw then, and again, I don't have statistics on this, it's subjective, anecdotal. You see a decrease in participation, right? And I know this because I see this with students who are just sitting on the sidelines and not participating. So, and again, I don't have statistics on the actual participation or engagement in after-school sports, but I seem to feel that that's probably steady, if not lower than what it used to be. Yeah. Let's say pre-pandemic. Okay. So to answer the question, they're not moving, right? They're not engaging in simple exercise like just walking, or they're not engaging in sports play. Like, remember back in gym when you played basketball, everybody played basketball, right? Floor hockey, everybody played floor hockey.
Sure, yeah.
We
had the different groups. You could do like lifetime sports or like team sports, like weight room and stuff. But that changing of the clothes, it seems like such a small thing that's so big in an energy shift perspective on being in the mindset world. Like just that ritual of changing into different clothes. Now it's talk about identity. You're just stripping into, okay, this is now my uniform that I'm going to do movement. That's why we have a football uniform. You have a baseball, you go in, it's a different feeling that you get into versus if you just have your clothes on, you're not going to feel that shift at all of, okay, now and our brain holds on to that energy
does.
like very powerfully. So they might think that's a small thing. That's a huge proponent.
It's a huge thing. And, you know, I've worked with, gosh, a couple of years ago, I worked with a client who wanted to start a fitness routine. I'm not, you know, I'm not a fitness instructor or fitness educator, but I want to support him in his process. And but he was nervous about going to the gym. So he came up with a plan. He goes, "Well, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna lay my gym clothes out for a few days on my bed, right? So I get up in the morning and I see it, and I know that this is the day. And I see my gym clothes in the bed. I know that's the day I'm going to work out. Right? He'd like to work out in the afternoon after work. So he would come home, he put his clothes on, and he would always tell me every time. He said, whenever I put that on, my shorts, my sweatpants, whatever it was, he goes, I knew I was going to the gym.
Yeah.
Right? I knew I was about to do something physical. And he always felt so much better when he did that. And with the students in the high schools and not having they're not afforded. They're not like saying you can't change, but they're giving that option. So
Absolutely.
if I'm given that option, I'm not changing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you think of that like as an adult, like we need like rules and structure. As a kid, you need it even more. Like just to like you need to build these rituals out there of these shifts over. And I say all the time, like don't rely on discipline. Like don't just think like I'm motivated or determined, like that's gonna happen. Create a routine and a ritual of it. And that guy there did a perfect thing. Like just put it out there that you're seeing it there, that you can't not see it. Like just put those reminders up. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah.
So brother, you are freaking awesome. This has been amazing. I've got some rapid fires to kind of close you out here.
Love it.
This has been a super deep conversation. These are much lighter, so we'll kind of close out with a comedic end, but we'll see how it goes. All right. For vacation, beach or mountains?
Mountains.
Mountains. Okay. What's a book you wish you could read again for the first time?
Oh God, that's easy. The Lord of the Rings series.
I knew you were going to go.
Yeah, you knew I was going to go there, didn't you? Yeah. I'm sorry, quick story behind that. My cousin bought me that book when I was 13 years old. I was homesick with strep throat, and he brought it over randomly. So this is February in 1979, 1980. It was the original Ballantine version of the book. So there, you know, there's like several versions, and there's like different verbiage in each version. So this is what was the quote unquote original version, right? I read The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and I read all that whole entire series in that 1 week.
Wow.
Yeah, 7 days.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've read it a dozen times since then. But yes, I would reread that book.
It's so funny. This is the second time on this, introductory podcast that a tangent on Lord of the Rings has gone on in rapid fire questions. So,
sorry about that.
No, I absolutely love it because I can go on the Battle of Helm's Deep for hours.
Hours, yes.
Window or aisle seat?
Aisle.
Sweet or savory?
Savory.
Okay. What's the best advice you were ever given?
Don't take life too seriously.
Yeah. What's the worst advice you're ever given?
Invest in the stock.
Of course, right there.
or more so, buy this car.
Yeah, right.
My first car I ever bought, a Suzuki Amigo, and I was that sucker who
don't buy a car that rhymes.
I was 21 years old. I had just got my first job. I was making some cake, some big cake. And I'm like, I'm buying a new car. My mother tried to talk me out of it, but I was head set. I'm like, I'm doing this. Yeah. I went in there. They took advantage of me. Yeah.
Oh, they saw you coming.
They saw me coming.
We've all been there. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
Last one, and I always love to close out with this. Who inspires you the most in your life?
My mother, and for a couple reasons. So she taught me the value of hard work. So we've been talking about doing hard things this whole time. I remember I was 16 years old. Imagine this. I'm 16 years old. I asked her, my friends and I, the four of us wanted to go to Florida on spring break, February break, right? And she said yes. So she said yes, but imagine a parent saying yes to this today, right? So yes, you can go to spring break. We were going to fly down, the four of us by ourselves at 16, go to this, my friend's grandmother's house, who my mother never met or talked to on the phone. We were going to stay at her house for a week, mostly unsupervised because the grandmother worked during the day. But we had access to a swimming pool, and she had beach access to this beach. I forget what the name of the beach is, right? So she says yes to this. Okay, so that's a whole other subject for another day. But I'm like, great. So I said, for Christmas, could you give me some money for when I go to Florida? And she goes, yeah. She says yes, I'll give you some money. But I was already a hard worker. I had a paper route. I was sweeping parking lots. I did landscaping in the fall, like raking leaves, all this. So I was saving money. Christmas morning, I'm down the stairs, and I'm all excited because I'm picturing a big fat envelope, right? And underneath the tree was, picture to this day, was a red shovel with a sign on it that said "Dollars for Christmas." So her gift to me was a tool so that I could go out and use to make some money. I remember that story. I'll never forget that. Mm-hmm. And yes, I did shovel a lot of driveways that winter.
That's awesome. Oh, what a great story. Yeah. Jeff Grogan, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff, brother, it's been a pleasure getting to know you over these last 5 years, and being a friend and being a brother. Yeah, I love you to death. I really appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate sharing in this journey with me.
All right, brother. Thank you so much.
Awesome, brother. If people want to check out more of what you're doing, if they want to see what you're doing with Saratoga Youth Mentor, what's the best place that they can go?
Yeah, so two easy ones, and these are direct access right to me, so no website. Saratoga Youth Mentor at gmail.com, all one long word, Saratoga Youth Mentor at gmail.com, and my phone number 518-257-2369. Send me a text, call me, I answer. Anything you need to know, just ask.
I love it.
All right, brother.
Till next time, brother. Listeners, thank you so much. Catch you on the next one. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you got some great value from this episode and a little more insight into some inspiring work happening right in this town. If you want to know more about our guests' work and check out more of what they are doing, please click on the links in the show notes below. And along with that, check out the direct link to 5-Minute Mindset. This is a 5-minute video that gives you the 2 best practices that you can do every day in 5 minutes that will create a major impact in your mental strength and resilience. If you are on your own mission to become physically and mentally stronger, these practices will be a serious game changer for you. Seriously. Thank you again for joining me today. I'll see you on the next one.